It feels like stepping into a memory, or maybe a dream. I've heard so many stories of the Baron Hotel. This place was alive, but now it looks very much empty. Quiet and empty.
The clock inside the hotel's lobby continues to mark time, even as its grand halls have emptied and its once vibrant walls have faded. In the Azizia district of Aleppo stands the Baron Hotel, Syria's oldest surviving hotel. It's more than just a building. It's a witness, a silent observer to decades of history, to empires rising and falling, wars erupting and subsiding, and the lives of countless individuals who pass through its doors. From royalty and explorers to refugees and revolutionaries, the Baron has seen it all. Today, we step back in time to uncover the story of the Baron Hotel. It's a tale of faith, ambition and survival, and one that mirrors the history of Aleppo itself. My name is Maxim Saakyan, and you're listening to Uncovering Roots.
Every Syrian with roots in Aleppo has heard of the old hotel. So many people say it's one with the city the way laurel soap or pistachios are. Many know it as the place where Agatha Christie stayed while her husband completed his archaeological work in the region.
This is Zila Demirjian, a Syrian Armenian who was born and raised in Aleppo. We both decided to work on this story together, looking into the history of a hotel that led so many lives and may now be facing its final chapter.
The first time we visited the Baron Hotel was in the summer of 2021, a year after returning to Aleppo from Lebanon. The city felt alien, transformed by 9 years of absence. In those months, my sister and I set out to rediscover our roots, and it wasn't until we stumbled upon the Baron Hotel that everything clicked. The hotel seemed frozen in time, suspended between Aleppo's golden age and its decline. You could see the shelling on the building, but it felt eerily intact, as if waiting for its visitors to return. Postcards and maps still stocked the reception. In the breakfast room, chairs stood at every table, and near the restaurant entrance, a wine barrel bore a laminated sign commemorating the hotel's centenary, the year the war began.
Before the Baron Hotel became the center of Aleppo's social and political life, before it welcomed kings, spies and writers, it was just an idea. Our journey begins in the 19th century, when Koko Mazloumian first arrived in Aleppo, laying the foundations for what would become a legendary legacy.
It was my great-grandfather, Koko. He had gone to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage, and on his way back, he stopped off in Aleppo. He saw what an up-and-coming city it was, how important it was portrayed.
Throughout this story, you'll hear the voice of Mary Momdjian. She's the granddaughter of Koko and was very much part of the hotel.
He saw the opportunity. He was a kind of visionary. He saw the opportunity of having some kind of a hospitality center, and he gathered the villagers because he was the head of the village. He gathered his people around him and said, I'm going to go to Aleppo.
Koko wasn't alone. He brought his family, his skills and his ambition. They would arrive in the late 1880s and had a plan to create a space in Aleppo for people to stay and converse.
He was a very well-respected person within his community. He was a visionary. Him and his brother were starting this hotel. When the hotel was built, the hotel was on the edge of the city. And people would tell him, you're crazy, you shouldn't, why are you going and building a hotel there? It's outside of the city. But he was a visionary and he was able to do it.
And he wasn't just a businessman. He was invested in Aleppo.
Also very much invested in the Armenian community. He was invested in local community. As I said, he was the head of the municipality. He was part of Aleppo. He was very much part of the community.
Armenians have always been an integral part of Aleppo's history and culture. In 1925, for example, Armenians made up over 25% of the city's population.
And then after, I don't know how many years, he moved to another building. It was called the Hotel du Parc. There he set up a hotel that stayed for quite a while. His two sons, my grandfather and his brother, set up two different hotels, the Zila Palace and the Aleppo Palace. And that was, I believe, in the early 1890s.
Now, before the Baron Hotel, he first opened up the Arat Hotel. After the family's successes, they decided to come together and build something even bigger.
By 1909, the building had started. They'd already got the Armenian architects from Paris, Caspar Napilian. The building process had started. By 1911, it had completed, and 1911 November was the opening. It had opened prior to that, but that was what nowadays you call a soft opening. The major opening happened in November of 1911 with a big ball, and that was the opening of the hotel.
At the time, 1909 to 10, when it was opening, it was seen as a sign of progress and modernization, when Aleppo was booming because the Berlin-Baghdad railway was being built.
This was a short snippet from Philip Mansell, a British historian of France and the Middle East who adores the Baron Hotel as well as the city, Aleppo.
It was a huge center. It was the equal of Damascus as the capital of an important province and a junction of railways as well as camel routes. I think they were pleased with it, as they were pleased with modern schools, modern barracks, and the modern hospitals like the Altunian Hospital.
This wasn't just another hotel. You suddenly had this grand building, high ceilings, chandeliers, electric lights, running hot water, not just in one or two rooms, but throughout the whole building. That was unheard of.
When it was first built, the Baron was on the outskirts of the city, facing open countryside. Now, a century later, it's miles inside Aleppo, and the only trees nearby were in its own grounds. The Baron Hotel is often referred to as one of the first hotels in the region. Now, there is an important point and distinction to make. There are two different types of quote-unquote accommodations. There are hotels, and there are khans.
And historically speaking, the concept of hotels came from the West.
This is my good friend Antoine Maqdis. We've known each other since 2021.
This is what we think because of our Orientalist approach to our history. But historically speaking, literally, that there was two kinds of hotels in Aleppo. The first one is the Khan.
Antoine is deeply immersed in the history and culture of Syria and knows the ins and outs of Aleppo.
Khan, it came from a Persian word named Khane, means the house. So actually, there was more than 150 Khan in Aleppo that used to give the service of residence for any, not tourists. Actually, they used to come here as a businessman to make their economic transformation, or to buy stuff from the east to the west, etc. Because Aleppo was the core or the heart of the Silk Road.
So with that being said, the Baron Hotel does truthfully compete as one of the first hotels in the region, and it became the center of everything.
You can understand the whole history of Aleppo in the previous century just by putting one camera on the balcony of the Baron Hotel. Because even the street was changed. Even the name of the street changed. It used to be called the Boulevard. After that, Baron Hotel Street.
The Baron had only been open for a couple of years when the world around it started to crumble. The First World War. The Ottoman Empire, which had ruled over Syria for centuries, was now at war. And the Baron? It was caught right in the middle of it.
To all intents and purposes, it was the headquarters of the Turkish army, although it was run on the lines of an ordinary hotel with the staff mostly Armenian.
That was Koko Mazloumian, who ran the hotel and is the late father of Mary Momdjian.
Definitely true. You had Jamal Pasha, who stayed in the hotel. You had Kemal Atatürk, who stayed in the hotel. You had other major Ottoman leaders who stayed in the hotel. And you had refugees, and one of the most famous refugees was, of course, Aram Andonian, who was hidden by my grandfather's brother, my great-uncle.
They were sheltering an Armenian journalist in a hotel full of Ottoman generals.
Aram Andonian wasn't just any journalist. He was the one who documented the Armenian genocide. He was arrested in Istanbul in 1915 and then deported to the Syrian desert. He managed to escape, and with the help of Naim Bey, a minor Ottoman official, he made his way back to Aleppo, where the Mazloumian family sheltered him.
Andonian, it seems, jumped the train on his way to exile. In those days, exile might end in all sorts of ways. He escaped from the train. In the process, he fractured his leg, was able to reach Aleppo somehow. My father and my uncle took him in, made him member of the staff for the form of it, but he was not really a member of the staff at all. But we had to give him some form of occupation in the hotel.
So we had Andonian in the Baron Hotel in secret, kind of working, and it was going well till one man arrived at the hotel in 1915.
Jamal Pasha was here in 1915, yes. Jamal Pasha came when he was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Suez Front.
Jamal Pasha. He was appointed governor of Syria in 1915 and was known among the locals as a Saffah, the butcher, where he hung many Lebanese and Syrians.
However, Jamal Pasha was able, because he was Commander-in-Chief, alter some dispositions taken if it suited him. And very often he countermanded orders to please my father or my uncle or some others. He had also other friends. He had Dr. Asadur Al-Tunyan, was very friendly with him, and his daughter Nora was able to save quite a few lives, the way my father and my uncle saved.
Even while the hotel operated as the central hub for the Ottoman authorities, the Mazloumian family quietly helped those in need and saved people's lives. Aram was among them, staying with the family until they were forced into exile.
Was it a neutral place? Yes, because you had all the Ottoman... it was a center for the Ottoman authorities, but my grandfather and his brother were very outspoken and tried to be as helpful to everybody as possible. I think it was Jamal Pasha who asked my grandfather, tomorrow is Easter, what kind of champagne are you going to open for us? And he said, I will serve champagne the day you leave.
And this quote very well could have been the reason why they were forced out of Syria. The Baron Hotel's neutrality was complicated. While it welcomed Ottoman officials, such defiance couldn't go unnoticed.
The Ottoman authorities loved the two brothers. Every time a new governor came, they served them, they became friendly with them, and through them they were able to help many families and refugees to escape the massacres, to the point where Talat became aware of them and made sure that they were sent out of Aleppo.
When the order came from Istanbul to the effect that the Mazloumian family were exiled to Mosul, which was a terminal destination of sinister reputation, upon hearing this, Jamal Pasha altered the order and said, send them to me to Jerusalem. We requested to stay in Zila instead of continuing to Jerusalem.
Zahle is a city in East Lebanon.
Now, we took Andonian with us to Zila in our exile. He was with us for about 6 months or more.
The Mazloumians and Andonian returned back to the hotel in late 1917.
We returned to Aleppo to find Mustafa Kemal Pasha occupying the hotel. The Turkish army was in retreat. All I know is that Andonian, with Dr. Al-Tunyan and his daughter, shortly after went to Paris, immediately after the armistice.
During his time at the Baron and with the Mazloumian family, Andonian received critical documents from that minor Ottoman official. These documents included telegrams and letters that implicated Talat Pasha in the Armenian genocide. Published in Andonian's book, The Memoirs of Naim Bey, these revelations became instrumental in proving who was responsible for the atrocities. The Baron maintained this delicate balance of neutrality during this time. It was a space where Ottoman officials conducted operations, yet it also became a sanctuary for refugees, including Andonian, whose work would go on to expose the crimes of those very officials. During their absence, the hotel remained operational, managed by a trusted friend who safeguarded its early legacy.
A friend of theirs took care of the hotel while they were away. They supposedly sold the hotel to their friend. He tore up the papers of the hotel and they just took over again, and the hotel continued as such. but it never stopped operating as a hotel.
Now we're going on and on about the hotel, but what did this actually look like?
We're on our way to the hotel. We don't know if we're going to be able to do anything, but I want to ask you, do you want the video from the balcony?
It officially opened in 1911 with 2 floors and 31 rooms. And then a 3rd floor was added later in 1940 with around 50 rooms. When you step in, you straight away notice the high ceilings and vintage furniture inside the lobby. It was this beautiful blend of European touch and Aleppian character. The intricate mosaic tiles and inviting leather chairs set the tone for a space that felt both grand and welcoming. The bar at the hotel offered a similar meeting of worlds. Its polished wooden counter and brass fixtures created an atmosphere of timeless warmth, where lively conversations between all forms of characters would happen, creating memories and stories. The war was over. The Ottomans had left. The Mazloumians returned to Aleppo, finding the Baron still standing, but in a city that had changed. There was a new power: the French.
Under the French mandate, Syria wasn't independent. It was under colonial rule. But this wasn't a return to Ottoman control. It was something different. And the Baron? It remained at the center of everything.
It was at its peak during the time of the French, when the English were there as well. It was a European hotel. It was a very well-known hotel. You had all the archaeologists who stayed there. You had a lot of spies who stayed there as well. It became a center for the Europeans. I mean, its allure was the fact that it had all the European conveniences that they were used to, and it had running hot water, electricity, something that at the time didn't exist in most hotels.
And this is where the hotel really transitioned to this place where big names stayed. You had everyone staying there, from writers to archaeologists to politicians to even spies. Arguably, the most notable guest was Agatha Christie, who wrote the first part of the famous Murder on the Orient Express book in room 203. Then you had the famous Lawrence of Arabia, with his unpaid bill proudly on display at the hotel. And to just name a few others, you had Swedish King Gustav Adolf, Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser, and even the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin. But what made the Baron different wasn't just its guests. It was the people who worked there, the ones who kept it running day after day, year after year.
But also the fact that the staff was so welcoming. There was a continuity in the staff. A lot of the staff were people who had been rescued from the massacres. They stayed for 30, 40 years in the hotel working. And many people would come, let's say, to visit the hotel, and then 10 years later they'd come back. And the staff would greet them by name and remember what they liked and their preferences. And that was something that, made them feel at home. It was like home away from home for them. So I think that was basically its allure.
And this place attracted everyone, not just the elite. It wasn't this luxury retreat. The Baron was affordable. Its prices made it accessible to a wide range of people, adding to its charm and its role as a hub of connection. And in fact, it wasn't just popular with guests outside of Aleppo. People in Aleppo frequented there often, whether that was for writers' club like Angela, or Harut, who enjoyed the bar there.
It was unique. We used to go and have meetings in the bar. There was a writers' group, and we used to meet in the bar every Tuesday, I think. The writers' group would be the 1980s, even the 1990s, perhaps.
I wasn't a patron of the hotel itself because obviously I live in the city. I wouldn't need a hotel room. But the hotel had a bar, which we frequently went to with friends, or whenever someone from outside was visiting Aleppo as a tourist.
On April 17, 1946, Syria officially became independent. And from the balcony of the Baron, people gathered to celebrate. It was the beginning of a new era.
The Baron had survived another war, another regime change, but the challenges were far from over.
The country was changing, and private businesses like the Baron began to feel the pressure. In 1963, the Ba'ath Party came to power, Nationalization became the new policy.
With the beginning of nationalization after 1960, it began to go downhill. Many of the rich entrepreneurial classes in Aleppo began to leave, so the natural clientele for meals and parties of the hotel was leaving.
Businesses, industries, even private property, everything was being brought under state control. It became difficult for people to run things the way they used to.
It got harder and harder to run the hotel. The hotel faced trouble during Assad, and the state bank took it over, still allowing the Mazloumians to run the entire operation. Later on, the Ministry of Tourism bought it from the bank and currently still technically own it. It was tough, and by 1993, Koko sadly passed away. The hotel carried on running as a family business, where his son, Armen, fully took over.
By the late 1970s, the Baron was no longer the first choice for the political elite. Quoting Koko, the last big politician who visited was the president of Syria at the time, Hafez al-Assad. With Damascus now firmly established as the country's political center, the Baron's influence faded. Its popularity fluctuated, reflecting the country's ups and downs.
Then you had the 67 war, the 73 war. There were times when tourism went down to zero. The whole of Aleppo was, in a really bad shape. And then later on, the 80s and 90s, it improved.
After Kriko came Koko, who you heard earlier. He made the Baron his life's work.
Talking about the hotel, he was passionate about the hotel. The hotel was his life. He was there all the time. Even when we went on holiday, let's say for a week or something, he was always in contact at the time.
Even on family holidays, he never really left. He would drive back to Aleppo during the week just to run the hotel.
He would take us and leave us there, and he would go back to Aleppo. It was only 3.5 hours at the time. And then he would stay all week in the hotel, taking care of the hotel, and he'd come on the weekends to spend some time with us and go back. So, he was always passionate about the hotel. The hotel was his life.
The hotel and where the family stayed were right next to each other, primarily for convenience.
And again, the hotel and the house was all intertwined. He would, not that my mother was very happy about it, but he would pick up anybody from the hotel. He would bring them home, knowing my mother would be upset because she would be either busy doing something or the sitting room wasn't up to standards in her case. And so he'd ring the doorbell from downstairs and say, "Oh, Sally, guess who I have with me? We're coming up." And so, he was very hospitable, but he was also a person who had friends in every walk of life.
By the 1990s, the Baron was still open, still run by the Mazloumian family. But it felt like it served as a different purpose. The people coming through its doors were now different.
It had become a place for travelers, those searching for something that didn't exist anymore.
Late 90s, you had a lot of buses, tour buses that came, early 2000s, Australians, Japanese, it became the fashion. The hotel went up and down with the political vagaries that took place in the country.
The hotel now is sadly not what it used to be. It was a civil war in Syria that delivered its most devastating blow.
On a cold winter's night in 2012, we crossed into Syria, and this is what we saw. A popular uprising that would eventually turn to war. It was a movement built on the call for democracy and dignity, fueled by decades of fear and brutal oppression. But the Assad regime responded with an iron fist. Peaceful protesters were attacked and killed. The bloodshed had begun.
As the war exploded throughout the city, the Baron found itself standing just yards away from the front line, separating government and rebel forces.
The hotel had bullet marks, but it was also had 2 direct hits. And so the hotel, the building was structurally damaged.
Cracks are running up the walls as a result of the earthquake 2 years ago. The 3rd floor is in such a bad shape that it's inaccessible, and the hotel is now empty, completely devoid of furniture.
Armenian Mazloumian opened the hotel doors to displaced families, continuing the Mazloumian tradition of using the Baron as a place of refuge and support. Sadly, Armen passed away in 2016, and with that, the hotel has not been open since. We started working on this story in 2024, but a couple of months ago, we all saw Syria back in the headlines.
The decade-old civil war in Syria appears to be reigniting as rebel fighters breached Aleppo, Syria's second largest city, following a surprise large-scale offensive this week.
Like 1 kilometer away from my house, so we might have to evacuate. It's a mess. It's been a mess since Wednesday. So I'll try, but I'll let you know in case you can get someone else to translate the... What was his name?
Speaking to Mary and others, this might just be the last chapter of the Baron Hotel. Maybe there'll be more, maybe that's it. We simply don't know.
The Baron has been a witness to so many turning points in history. Ottoman rule, French occupation, independence, war, and now it's witnessing something else. But this might be the last time.
With the current situation, I have no idea what's happening and what will happen. Your guess is as good as mine at this point. I think everybody is waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen in Syria. So, unfortunately, I have no answers for you for that.
So what happens now? The Baron stands, but it's frozen in time. No longer hosting guests, no longer at the center of anything.
There's talk of restoring it, of preserving what's left, but even if it's restored, it will never be what it once was.
The Baron is more than just a symbol of Aleppo's past. It was there through empire and independence, celebration and catastrophe. It adapted, endured, and witnessed. It held on to its identity even as the world around it shifted again and again.
And when spaces like this disappear, it's not just history we lose. It's belonging, continuity, and culture.
And that's what's really at stake. Not just the building, but the memory of what it stood for.
It was a time capsule, a place where you could stay the night and feel like you'd stepped into another era. For travelers, it was magic. For us, it was memory.
The past 100 years of the hotel hasn't just been important for Aleppo, but for the Mazloumian family too.
The Baron Hotel was the center of our lives. I know it is a physical building, but it had its spirit. The hotel, and as I said, the family were all one and part of each other. For us, the hotel was home. It changed so much. Even in my own lifetime, it changed so much. It had so many changes and so many different aspects that took place, different stories that took place that we were all involved in, and that create our memories, that created our lives, that sort of formed who we were. It was integral, and it still is integral to us. The hotel was always and will be very special.
As long as we keep telling these stories, the Baron doesn't disappear. A big thank you to all for listening to the first episode of our new season of Uncovering Roots. There will be monthly stories coming out for this full season. Now, we're always searching for stories, so if you feel like there's a story to unpack, or you have a story of your own you'd love to tell, reach out to us via email or Instagram, which you can see in the description, and we can go from there. I'm super excited to be releasing stories again, and I hope you all enjoy it. This episode was produced by me, Maxim Saakyan, together with Zila Demirjian. Sound designed by myself, and the theme tune was composed by Olivia Melkonian. Take care, and see you next time.